He's never fought us. Not us united.
My favorite moment in the entire... Maybe I should complicate this before I start speaking here. Hey guys, welcome to Comics League. I'm Jared, and today I got a very special discussion for you guys today. So, we're going to talk about 3 ways that the SnyderVerse could return. Now, these 3 ways, some of these are more likely than others. I'll be sure to designate them as such as we go through them throughout the course of this video. Now, to be clear, either of these options I'm going to give you are fine, and one of these options does not exclude the other 2. That'll make sense when I move on the video. So, there are 3 ways that the SnyderVerse can return: as a comic book, as an animated project, or as a live-action project. Now, we're going to go through all 3 of these. Now, the most likely one, honestly, is as a comic book, which, okay, this is the one that does not exclude the other 2. Let me explain. Okay, so let's say DC Comics Jim Lee comes to Zack Snyder and says, hey, do you want to do your thing as a comic book series? Okay, fine, we'll do that. I'll write it, or you'll give us a story outline. We'll have Scott Snyder do it. Yes, exactly. And maybe Jim Lee, Fabok, or Capullo draw it. And let's say the book comes out. Let's say the book does gangbusters. Then they could say, hey, Zack, would you want to, since this is really popular, would you want to come back and do this as an actual live action project? Because as we saw, all right, so a couple of years ago, Zack Snyder posted a photo for Thanksgiving of his turkey, and he had the absolute version of Final Crisis in the background. Now, whether or not you think that was a sign from Zack is irrelevant to this conversation. The important thing about that is that as soon as that video came out, the Absolute Edition and the Omnibus for Final Crisis sold out on Amazon. And those are not cheap books. Sold out. So it stands to reason that if they told Zack, hey, dude, Black Label, you're the rest of the SnyderVerse, you can even re-release the other movies as a comic book, and combine it into one giant omnibus and just call it Zack Snyder's DC Universe or something like that as an omnibus. But my point is, comic book happens, it sells out, because I think it would sell very well for DC. And then guess what? Hey, it sells really well. Here's why it would work. Because you have another metric beyond social media engagement. Because that could be manipulated in certain ways. I think that the trending event was true. But my point is, there's less of a way that the antis can point to that and say, well, that was made up or something like that. If it sells, it sells. Money talks. So if it comes back as a comic book, that does not necessarily mean it will not come back as a live action or an animated project. That's why I'm saying, for right now, honestly, the best option would be a comic book. That's all I'm saying right there. Best option. Now, as an animated project. Now, here's the thing. I know when you guys hear animated, you think, okay, Henry Cavill's not going to play Superman. We're not going to see Henry Cavill and stuff. Here's where that's wrong, and particularly why it's good that the hashtag is to sell to license to Netflix. Because if any of you have seen Love, Death, and Robots, some of the animation that they do for that, let me give you an example. I'm going to pull up a still from Love, Death, and Robots, and you tell me if this looks actually pretty good. Here's Joe Manganiello in Love, Death, and Robots. He's wearing a helmet, but still. So it would look like that. So you could still scan Henry Cavill's face. You could still have Henry Cavill. But you would do it in a 3D animated thing. There you go. You could still have him. You can even still do the Henry Cavill. You can even bring in everyone to voice their characters. It would be animation. It would be, honestly, and Nick has said this on the podcast a couple of times, it's easier because they could be anywhere filming a movie and just say, hey, do you want to go into a recording studio for the afternoon, record your lines? Because it would take an afternoon to read through the entire SnyderVerse lines, assuming that Zack has a script. and then just put those in there. Then at some point, have the actors come in, 3D scan them, 3D scan all the suits and everything to make it look really good. And then guess what? You have a Return to Snyderverse. So what I'm saying, the reason why I bring this up is because when I say animation, it would not, I repeat, would not and does not mean it's going to necessarily look like Invincible or like any of the other cartoony animation styles. It would not be that. It would be most likely this. So that's animation, which, hey, that could be pretty cool. Then finally, live action project. Now, I'm going to tell you why I think that this is likely and this could happen. Because in addition to the social media engagement, anything Zack Snyder gets. All right. So let's say The Flash and Aquaman make $1 billion. Here's why it's important that those do. Because those are versions started by Zack Snyder. Whether or not they're still in like the SnyderVerse, which they are because Zack Snyder's Justice League is clearly canon to the Flash. But beyond that, these are versions started by Zack. So, and the SnyderVerse is the current versions of these characters. And the reason why they're rebooting is because right now they don't think there's that much monetary incentive of keeping these versions around. So if like Aquaman, Shazam, and all likelihood will make $1 billion. Aquaman and Flash. Let's say they do make $1 billion. Then Zaslav is like, can we really replace all these people because this made $1 billion? How are we going to explain this to our shareholders? And you could say, well, James Gunn is independent of of like any oversight. DC is its own thing. Yeah, but he still has to answer to Zaslav, and Zaslav answers to the shareholders. So if the shareholders tell him, okay, so these two movies made $1 billion and you're throwing that away, what are you doing? That's why I think a lot of what James Gunn is doing maybe won't come to fruition. But all right, my point is, all right. So let's say they make $1 billion. Then let's say Rebel Moon comes out on Netflix and does gangbusters, which it probably will because it's basically Zack Snyder's Star Wars. And with Star Wars burning so many fans, this could be a good opportunity to bring in those disenfranchised fans and tell them, hey, here's a Star Wars universe for you because Rebel Moon started as a Zack Snyder Star Wars pitch. So pumped for that, by the way. But if that movie makes gangbusters, it'll encourage a Netflix to say, hey, Zack, what else you got? And remember, Zack Snyder practically has full freedom at Netflix. They basically told him, go create. So this would encourage Netflix, after seeing like all these thousands of tweets about the SnyderVerse thing, come to Zack and say, hey, let's say we can arrange it with Warner Brothers and somehow fandangle this. Would you be interested in doing that? And then Zack would in all likelihood, hopefully say yes. Hopefully. If he says no, then okay, we have to move on. But let's say he says yes. This starts the conversation. Because remember what James Gunn said. He was very clear that, well, clear is an objective term. I'll explain that in a second. He said, Netflix has not shown has not expressed interest, and Zack has not expressed interest. There's two problems. There's a problem with that statement. First off, I'm going to bring that up because it sounds like he didn't even ask. Because if he asked them and they said no, okay, fine. But if the conversation didn't come up, okay, I'm like, dude, at least ask. But my point is, this would encourage, at least to start the conversation. Can we do any of these options? Can we do like animated or live action? Can we do any of these options? And then you could say, and then here's the thing, you people, detractors of this particular idea bring up, well, Netflix is not going to want to take on all that debt from the Snyderverse. Who says it would be Netflix that would assume all of the cost? It could be they split it, or let me put it this way, that's for the contract negotiations to iron out. But my point is, it's not as impossible as people think. So now you may be wondering which one of these would I prefer. Obviously, I would take live action. I would 100% take live action. That's my preferred option. If I can't get that, either of the other two is fine with me, because an omnibus that says Zack Snyder's DC SnyderVerse would look fantastic on my shelf, and I would buy the hell out of that omnibus. or animation. If it's looking at the robots animation, it's gonna look really good. So that's my 2 cents on it. Honestly, I'd say all three. I'd say the comic book is the most likely because we've seen that happen in the past. And then, honestly, I'm going to tell you this. From where I see it, based on the points I brought up, live action and animated, if I have to put a percentage, I'd say probably 40. Probably, I would say. I'm trying to be able to say. I mean, anime is more likely. I'm going to tell you that right now. But I'm going to give you. I don't think it's like a 10% chance. I disagree with Nick on that. I think it's like 80-20. It's animated over live action. But that's still a significant 20%. And hey, it could be more because guess what? The same people who are adamant that the SnyderVerse would not come back as a license to Netflix were the same people that told you the Snyder Cut will never be released. Adamant that would never happen. People connected to the entertainment industry. We had Xevious on Comics League Dark a couple of weeks ago, and he's like very connected to the entertainment industry. And he said there are people that know what they're talking about too. And we're very connected, saying there's absolutely zero circumstances when the Snyderverse would be released. The Snyder Cut would be released. And we all know what happened. I have the DVD on my shelf. So literally nothing is impossible. You just need the will. Because with the live action project, that requires the will of both sides. And honestly, Rebel Moon doing well could lead to the will of at least one side to come to a Gunn and Zaslav and say, hey, can we do this? And then they would, if Warner Brothers and DC goes, okay, fine, then they can start the negotiation process. So that's my 2 cents. You could think I'm crazy. You could think I'm wrong. You could think I'm right. Drop in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Be civil. Cannot stress this enough. Be civil, because I only respond to civil comments. If you think I'm wrong, then drop in the comments. That's fine. If you think I'm right, drop in the comments. And also comment which of these would you prefer. Would you prefer, let's say you can't do live action, would you prefer animated or comic book? If the live action is not going to be an option, and don't say live action or not, because I know that if it came back as an animated or a comic, you would consume that content. Let's be clear here. So that's where I'm going to leave this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, I mean, it's likely it'll cut. I'm 100% sure that the Snyderverse will come back in some form. One of these 3 forms, it will come back. 100% sure. 100. Just like I was right that the Snyder Cut was going to be canon. So that's all I'm going to say there. Stay work. I will see you in the next discussion. Bye-bye.